Nerds, creatives, and nerdy creatives have all come together to show off their skills in this niche community of cosplay. Today, I have the wonderfully talented Chelle on to talk about her experience within this community. We talk about how the world looks at adults dressing up in costumes, creepy guys at conventions, and even the sexier side that is cosplay. Now, as always, I'm Trevor, and this is Out of Somewhere.
I am Chelle, also known as Chelle Cosplay, and as the title may suggest, I am in fact a cosplayer. I do YouTube, I do Instagram, photo shoots, videos, everything and anything encompassing cosplay.
All right, so, and then for the somehow ill-informed, what is cosplay by your definition?
Cosplay, in the barest bone terms, is the act of dressing up as a character.
So, like Halloween, but kind of.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of a good way to describe it. It can be Halloween anytime, but considerably less candy.
So, how'd you get into it? What got you started dressing up like characters for more than just candy?
Exactly. Yeah. That's the trick, transitioning from that to the full time. I learned about cosplay for the very first time when I was a freshman in high school, actually. So that would have been, oh gosh, 2012, which is insane to think about. But it's really been in the last decade in America and the United States that cosplay has kind of taken off. So I kind of came in at the start of that. I had a friend in my English class that had some other friends. So it was like, the friend of the friend who started going to conventions and dressing up as characters. And I would see their photos on these like Facebook albums they would make of going to different conventions. And it looked like so much fun and it looked so cool. And I was very jealous.
So, what about stuck out to you, like as being cool and fun?
Yeah. So I've always been a nerd and I've also always been creative. I love crafting. I've always been a knitter, like a sewer. I learned to sew when I was like 11. So I loved the idea of getting to create something that was so intrinsically related to what you were passionate about in the fan community.
Okay, so what kind of communities does that fall under for you? Because cosplay can be literally anything. It seems, whatever sort of communities you're part of, they can dress up as just anything from whatever that is. What's yours?
Yeah, you really can. I mean, cosplay kind of originated with anime or sci-fi roots, but I really like North American cartoons. One of my very first cosplays was Mabel from Gravity Falls, which is like a Disney show from back in the day that I adore. I also have cosplayed Disney princesses, like I guess she's not a princess, but Honey Lemon from Big Hero 6.
Okay.
Yeah, so not quite a princess. I've cosplayed Bean from Disenchantment, which is a series on Netflix. And then I've also cosplayed like better known characters that people would actually recognize. So a lot of Danganronpa characters, which is popular like anime and video game franchise. I'm currently dressed as Misa Amane from Death Note because I was filming today and I figured I might as well keep it on for this.
Appreciate it. I'm sure all the video watchers will definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, it'll be a little bit lost on the listeners, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's fine. As is the ways of audio content. But so how much of your cosplay? So, like you said, you mentioned you've always been very crafty, uh, like sewing and knitting. How much of that falls into what you currently do?
So I think one of the reasons why cosplay is so great and so many people love cosplay is because you can kind of take whatever you want from it and really make it your own and enjoy it. So right now, I do some crafting. I film, some tutorials where I do paint work or foam work, or I do like a quick sewing tutorial. But more so, my passion right now is video and photography, so visual mediums. And conveying my cosplay to wider audiences through the power of the internet.
All right. Um, so you just brought it up. This is something that I've noticed in the cosplay community. The obsession with foam. Why is foam such a big deal in your community? Like it immediately I it's not something that would stand out, but for some reason you guys are obsessed with it. Why?
That's so funny because no one's ever pointed that out before, but it's completely true. We're very obsessed with foam. I'd say it's because foam is a really adaptable material, and it's really like all purposes. So you can bend it and shape it to form a shape with like heat. You can, heat mold it to your face or an arm or a really cool shape. You can prime it and paint it and sand it and carve it. You can, do all these sorts of things with it. And the best thing is probably that it's very lightweight and it's very safe. So for a lot of like conventions, if you are making armor or making a big prop, there are safety checks and things you have to consider when you're constructing. So foam is always a very safe option to get past like weapons check at the
What
convention.
is like weapons check? Like what is a restriction on that sort of stuff?
It varies from convention to convention. I know some big ones like San Diego Comic-Con, they aren't even allowing like prop guns anymore, even things that look vaguely like a gun, because they're being very strict about that now,
Just like
which,
no matter what is if it looks like a gun, like no matter how fake it.
exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah. Other conventions, I go to Anime Boston in Boston every spring quite a bit, and I've taken like croquet mallets, and literally the woman at weapons check like picked it up, smacked it against her hand a couple times, and then was just like, "You're good."
All right. What was she checking for with that? Like,
I think she's checking to make sure I can't like crack someone's skull open, for lack of a better term.
I guess so. Yeah, I don't know. So well, jumping to conventions. What's the I don't know, what's the deal with conventions? Like, what is special about conventions for cosplay?
I think the great thing about conventions for cosplayers is that it's a chance to really like show off.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I know personally, I am very much a cosplayer who cosplays for conventions. I'll plan, my year and what I want to cosplay that year around what I want to take to different conventions, which has been really hard during COVID, of course, because
Yeah.
everything's canceled. But it's a great time to like interact with the community, and it can be really, really fun, and then in turn really rewarding to plan something, work on something, put a lot of love and labor into something, and then see the reaction from everyone else who also enjoys that medium.
So what are those interactions like? Like just kind of being like, is there a lot of technical talk? Like, oh, like was how'd you make that, or was that like how are those conversations go?
It totally varies from person to person. Some I feel like the people who are really into the technical aspect are weirdly enough like middle-aged men
Oh,
who are like, "Oh, like how did you make that? Like that's so interesting." Like they want to understand like the crafting and the construction behind it. I get a lot of like people my age and younger, like teenage girls who just like think I'm really cute and like want to take pictures or like selfies. I really love reactions from kids. I cosplay Supergirl to Boston Comic Con every few years, and taking like pictures with kids who are so excited to see a superhero is one of my favorite things.
nice. So what's some like convention etiquette, I guess, when it comes to like cosplaying? Because like obviously you work on these things, put a bunch of time into them. Sometimes, especially these more elaborate ones, tend to be potentially fragile or anything. Like, is there any kind of either spoken or even unspoken like etiquette when it comes to interacting with cosplayers at these conventions?
There definitely is. And you kind of already touched on like the theory behind it, because when you are walking up to a cosplayer, you do not know how many months or weeks they have spent making that thing, how much time it took them, how much money it took, everything that went into it. So the biggest thing is to be very respectful. And I would say the biggest thing is to ask,
Is that a
ask,
problem?
hey, could I take a photo? Ask, hey, would it be okay if I touch your prop? Would it be okay if I put my like arm on your shoulder for this picture? Just, treat them like a person, which is kind of crazy to say, but when people see someone in cosplay, they kind of think they're at Disney World and it's like a character they can play
Right.
around with,
Yeah.
but it's still a human.
It's still human, especially whenever it's like, I mean, not that this should necessarily be an exception, but it's like it's you're not some person that's like paid to be at this like spot, or even if you are, um, like you're just a person attending this in the costume. Like it doesn't make you any
Exactly.
less of like an exception to any kind of normal social boundaries.
Exactly. I try to convey the message to my like viewers when I talk about con etiquette that you should treat someone at a convention almost the same as you would treat a stranger in the line at Starbucks. Which sounds a little weird because, conventions are this amazing space where everyone's a nerd and you'd think, oh, it's a great opportunity to be friendly.
Hmm.
And it is, but you still have to be respectful and mindful that there's a person under the cosplay.
Is there any like clear since because like at the same time like if you are in cosplay there is still like comics at least some level of exception like you're going to get at least some level of attention
Mhm.
and like you should be going with the mindset that like yeah you are and that's probably why you're dressing up in cosplay is because you want some sort of appreciation for the work you put in um but there's still that like boundary.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, a lot of people cosplay and go to conventions because it's their way of like showing their appreciation for this hobby and this thing they enjoy. And it's a great jumping off point for conversations and meeting people. But at the same time, just because someone's in cosplay doesn't mean you can automatically like take a picture of them.
Yeah,
So it's always important to just ask and be respectful.
is that like a is that have you personally run into like a lot of issues with that?
It is a problem. Yeah, I think personally the most issues I've actually had, and this is kind of a personal like preference, but if I'm sitting down and eating, I don't want to get up and take a photo because like I'm kind of taking a break, I'm trying to enjoy myself. It's like you said earlier, I'm just another attendee like going about my day, even though I'm wearing cosplay. That's my outfit for the day, but I'm still going about my day. And
Right.
usually at conventions, I don't eat very much. So when I'm sitting down and eating, like it is like a set block of 15 minutes. I am not getting back up. So I've had instances before where I'm like sitting on the floor, half out of costume, like half of it isn't even on my body anymore, shoving a granola bar into my mouth. And people ask for photos, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, no. And they look kind of pissed, which it kind of annoys me.
Yeah, I can definitely see that from the other side of being like, wait, but like you're in costume, isn't this like why you're here? Like is it always pretty much like people who aren't cosplaying that ends up kind of being the culprit?
That is definitely the case, which is something that kind of irritates me because, cosplayers and people in the community say this over and over and over every year. But the reason there are still issues is because the people who aren't in that community don't know and don't understand. And how are we going to reach that message to them? That's kind of the problem in my eye.
Right? Yeah, just because like have since they're never on the other side of it, they never realize like how important those like breaks out of like constantly being asked for pictures or whatever. Um, does that lead
Yeah.
into like if you are like out and like up and about and like in a mindset where you are like okay with pictures being taken, okay with like people coming up to you, is that a thing where like I mean you're dressed up as a character, do you feel like you have to portray a character in any kind of form? Is that a thing?
That definitely is a thing. That's kind of like merging into role play territory where you're like acting and pretending to be the character. And personally, it's not my thing. I just like being myself, dressed in a costume. Some people will come up to you and like say something from the show or the movie and like expect you to react. So I try to, kind of do that and be polite, but I'm not going to have like a whole conversation with you in like Sindarian Elvish. Like if I'm dressed as Galadriel, like that's not going to happen.
Is yeah, like is it a cultural thing that if you cosplay something, you should have a deep knowledge of it? Is there at least like an expectation of that, and whether or not that's good or not? But you can go into it.
I think there was years ago in the past. And I think as a community, hopefully we've kind of progressed past that. Because there's some people who just cosplay a character because they really, really love the design and it's a beautiful design and they really enjoyed making it. And I think, that's okay. Hopefully you have like some bare bones knowledge about what you're cosplaying, but whatever your reason, we're all just nerds dressing up.
Yeah, I think that like parallels a lot with the stereotypes with like tattoos, which is like as though every tattoo needs like heavy meaning and like you need to like have a bunch of stuff tied to it. Whereas like, nah, I just like the design, so I got put on my body. Whereas like, yeah, I just really like the design of the characters, so I dressed up as it. Like
Hmm.
nothing wrong with something. You just think something is cool. I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, do you have any like sort of? I noticed on YouTube you have like a specific horror story from a con. If you want to give at least a short version of that, just curious if you'd want
Sure,
to.
but which horror story are you talking about? Because there's a few.
All right, give me a good one then. Maybe I didn't pick one out.
um, so from a convention specifically, I've definitely had some weird interactions with people.
All right, go on.
Yeah. So, you know, I cosplay a wide variety of characters. I cosplay a lot of like kind of like young teenage girls, like Heather Chandler, like in a skirt and like kind of a school uniform. I've cosplayed a character that was literally just like wearing like a very short bathrobe around like a convention center at 9 on a Saturday night. And the funny thing to me is that none of those cosplays like get any negative or unwanted attention.
Okay.
The cosplay that has gotten the most weird comments by far, and this is crazy to me, was Honey Lemon from Big Hero 6.
All right, I'm not gonna lie. I haven't seen that movie, so I'm gonna take 2 seconds to look up who this is.
Go for it. It's, you know, it's a Disney character and she's a cartoon, and it's strange that that's the one they fixate on to me.
And so what? Go more. What happened with this?
Yeah, so the that is the cosplay by far I've had the most strange interactions in. And I have a whole video of this on YouTube just talking about these interactions. But generally speaking, they were all from, oh God, I hate saying this because I try not to stereotype, but they were from guys who you would like definitely picture if you imagine the stereotype of like a gamer, like nice guy, like wearing a fedora with like the scraggly
How how
beard and the
how
anime
many
t-shirt.
how many of these guys had fedoras?
Okay, so actually there were two that stopped me on one particular day, and I swear they were identical.
Wow. Yeah, that was kind of. I was gonna save that a little bit for later, but like, yeah, that's not just a stereotype. Like, it's a thing.
Hmm. Apparently it's real. I've witnessed it.
Oh man. So I've looked up this Honey Lemon character, and they're very normal looking. I don't know, like I
Exactly. That's why it's
it
weird.
just looks like now which version? She apparently has like this like helmeted version. Is it that one or like her like day wear like
She has an
look?
armor version, and then
Yeah.
there's a version where she's wearing like a yellow dress and sweater. I
Yeah.
was the yellow dress and sweater.
Yeah, that's even more confusing then. Cuz
I
like
it,
this
it was my first cosplay. That was the first cosplay I ever did, and it's the weirdest one, apparently.
this this is like literally any normal person's outfit to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like what were these interactions like? Like what'd they do?
So they, you know, stopped me and asked for a photo, which is like totally cool. I was like, "Oh yeah, great. I'm so happy someone likes my cosplay. I will gladly take a photo if you stop me and ask politely." It was the conversation that ensued after that was quite interesting each time because
When you say each time, how many times is this? Like the two specifically
this
that you're thinking of with like the fedora guys, or like
oh, specifically with the fedora guys, there have been at least three or four at different conventions as well.
all right. So what's a highlight? I keep interrupting you. Go on.
No worries. The highlight is definitely basically the conversation would go like they would tell me how much they liked Honey Lemon, and I would just get like a super weird bad vibe from it. But the highlight was the one guy who told me he loved Honey Lemon because she was so motherly. And it was that
Motherly.
word that just really struck me.
And yeah, that's a weird thing to stick out about a character. Like, how old are these guys?
They
Like,
were, you know, at least late 20s. And I think the reason why it was so like impressed on me was because I was actually 17 at the time. So I was pretty young.
oh, okay,
Yeah. It was not great.
yeah, yeah. How? No, because then at that point you're like, calling a 17-year-old motherly, and that's just kind of weird.
It was just creepy. I was alone like every single time. I never had a creepy conversation when I was like with a friend. Each of these times this happened, I was like walking by myself from one place to another to like meet a person. So they hit you when you're alone. Watch out, kids.
Jesus. So how do you respond to that? Like, what? How do you go about this interaction?
To be honest, I am very non-confrontational, which
Right, as I
is
feel like most
something.
people would be in these, but like,
Yeah, well, I would like to be better at like kind of speaking up for myself and saying when like you're not act and like be able to say to someone, you're not acting appropriately. I don't like that you just said that. That's kind of weird. Like I would like to be able to kind of stick up for myself a little bit more, but pretty much my go-to is just saying, "Oh, thanks. I have to be somewhere. Bye now."
just dip out of that conversation as quickly as you can once things like hit a tipping
Exactly. Just
point.
retreat. Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really
And
just
I mean, I
insane.
want to emphasize like the interactions I had with these guys were not like inherently like malicious or harmful. They were weird, they were awkward, but they weren't like bad people. It was just a strange interaction because I've been harassed in cosplay. You know, I've been catcalled, I've been called like inappropriate terms, and those were not these stories. So these guys were like, okay, just awkward.
Just real awkward and just fitting. So what does this does like the catcalling stuff, does that happen within like a convention setting, or does that happen like outside of the convention normally? Like what's
It has happened in both. More often, it does happen out of a convention because, you know, when you're walking around like the city taking photos in a weird outfit, people notice and they
mhm.
tend to say something.
Right. And so like for that, I mean, I guess it's usually just a passing moment more than anything.
Yeah, it's usually like someone just like walking the opposite direction on the sidewalk who feels the need somehow to like make some annoying comment about you as if you're not just trying to go about your day.
Annoying and like, yeah, just like a really like catcalling thing, or like can you be more
Exactly.
specific? Just like
Yeah. I was called schoolgirl once, which really, really rubbed me the wrong way.
it's a weird one.
Yeah.
So going rolling back a little bit,
Mhm.
uh so when coming up with cosplays, going more of the creative process, you have a lot of background in the sewing and everything, like you said, but there's also a large market for buying cosplays. Um, is there like a is that more is there any kind of frowned upon nature to just having like a fully bought cosplay versus doing taking a lot of the time to craft one yourself, or
There is some kind of bias between those two options, you know, completely buying a cosplay or putting a lot of like time and effort into making it. There's definitely, you know, it used to be worse kind of a few years ago, honestly. I think the community has gotten a lot more progressive through a lot of efforts by people to say it's okay to buy cosplay. Like, it's not a shame if you don't have the time or skill to sew. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But there is well deserved praise for people who do put in a lot of time and effort and skill to those things. And I think that's reflected in, you know, professional competitions and um, championships and all of these like very large events that do judge people on craftsmanship and give out some pretty hefty prizes for that.
so what's like a hefty prize? I didn't even know there was like a large like competition scene for this sort of thing.
Oh, dude, you are missing out. The competition scene is huge.
Tell me more.
Yeah, so basically every convention, large or small, that I've ever been to at least, has a portion that is called the masquerade.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is an event that is like kind of the main event. It's held usually like 7 or 8 p.m., like Saturday night, like the big night of the convention. And it's held usually in the biggest ballroom they have available. And it can be something like a skit or a dance, but the big like prizes and the big things people go for are cosplay craftsmanship awards.
Okay.
So there's different classes. There's like, beginner, junior craftsman, master class, all of these different like tiers based on your level of experience in years and also the awards you have won before. So if you've won an award in like the low beginners class tier, you are competing in like the next upper tier next time. And I've seen people win prizes in the thousands of dollars.
Wow. So and these are just like anything, like these aren't put into categories within those at all. It's just kind of like, because like I don't know, I could see a bias going towards something, a cosplay which I don't know, say has like I've seen those like really uh heavy like big armor pieces with like a bunch of lights on them and everything, where it's like really intricate. How
Mhm.
like can you even go about comparing that to something which I don't know, could be more sort of simplistic but like more uh sophisticated in its own way? It feels like that's a hard decision, but I guess that's also why I don't judge these things.
Yeah. The judges panel is usually made up of people who are kind of considered like professionals in this industry. So, professional cosplayers or professionals in some sort of like fan capacity, like they work with media or they're a voice actor, something like that. People who have won a lot of awards before, masterclass winners. So they find very experienced judges who know what they are doing and know what they're looking for in terms of like quality and craftsmanship.
All right. So outside looking in, what do you think is the general outside perception that people have on cosplay, and how do you think that could more than likely be improved? Because I'm
Yeah,
sure to a lot of
exactly.
people, it's more or less just like people dressing up, and that's kind of weird.
So I was actually literally going to say, I think people see people dressing up and think it's pretty weird, which I don't think is wrong because it is. I am very much of the opinion that we are all just nerds playing dress up, and some of us take it way too seriously. But at the end of the day, we're nerds playing dress up.
What do you mean? Some of us take it too seriously?
So the cosplay community is pretty like rife with drama usually. Whether
Drama
it's
within people dressing up in costumes.
exactly right, it sounds ridiculous, but there's a lot of drama that goes down. Some of it deserved, some of it not. People will get mad at someone for like cosplaying the same character they are, which is ridiculous
Like
because
just generally at a convention, like
yeah,
just like there can only be
yeah,
one, and just like
yeah.
start throwing down. Like
It's so dumb. It's so dumb. Um, but like from the perspective of people looking at cosplay, I think it's easy to kind of like see all that drama going down and think like, oh, it's a bunch of like children running around
mm-hmm.
not knowing anything they're doing. But I enjoy cosplay because it really is a hobby with kind of built-in friends, if that makes sense.
I
Yeah,
suppose so. Like there's a sense of community, and so anyone that you see in cosplay has some level of connection to you, right?
exactly. I think the reason why I really enjoy conventions and cosplaying at conventions so much is because, despite like my internet persona, I am a very introverted person. I am a very anxious person. And I don't always feel comfortable like talking to new people and meeting new people. So, cosplaying conventions is so, so wonderful to me because when you are literally dressed as a character from your favorite show, everyone knows that you probably like that thing a whole lot. And it is a visual beacon to other people who also like that thing to say, hey, come talk to me. We have something in common.
Nice. No, that's really cool to have that sort of camaraderie and just sense of security within a group of
Mhm.
people. But shoot, I just lost it. Um,
I can speak more to
sure.
also people looking in on the community.
Yeah.
I think what people should realize and kind of like think about more when they look at cosplayers and like, maybe they see some like kids running around in the local park dressed like weirdos and they're like, "Oh God, what have the youth come to?" But honestly, cosplay as a hobby overall, I think is so valuable because it allows you to do so many things. It allows you to sew, it allows you to craft, it allows you to use digital media. For me, it allows me to do videos and editing. And those skills actually got me a real 9 to 5 job. And those are skills I got through cosplay. So, hey, it's useful.
Nice. And so, yeah, like this thing that starts as what could outside be just a very unusual hobby can transfer into some skills which apply elsewhere beyond the like sewing technical skills, but expand into lots of other things. So you mentioned like you really enjoy the film and photography aspect of things. That leads into social media and so on. How do you feel cosplay is being portrayed in social media at why? Because that's like obviously the growth point for a lot of things, cosplay especially, as they start seeing like, whoa, this is this animated character being portrayed in real life. That can really spur a lot of things. What's your general
Mhm.
feelings on it?
I think social media is probably the best thing for cosplay, honestly, especially in this age of COVID when conventions no longer really exist. It's kind of the only way to cosplay right now to, take photos to put online or take videos to put online. And that is how we are kind of replacing that interaction that we would normally get in a convention scene.
Is it a generally positive community?
My community that I've kind of garnered on my social media, I like to think is very positive. Um, but it's honestly like any social media community. I mean, you look at Facebook and everyone's yelling at each other constantly.
Right.
So you kind of have to curate your own experience and guide your own ship through like the sea of all of the content that is there and decide who you want to interact with, honestly.
Yeah, because there definitely seems to be. I mean, this goes with like any social media where you're putting yourself out there. Um, you're taking this public interaction that you'd have at something like a convention, but now also putting this layer of separation that could give some comfort or, uh, yeah, I just guess like comfort for some people to either be more outgoing for themselves, either like behind the camera or as well as the other side of things with things like internet trolls and so on, um, to spew hate and stuff like that.
Mhm. I've been pretty lucky to avoid any real serious or vicious hate so far in my cosplay career. Maybe that's because I cosplay like non-popular cartoon characters. So I kind of have like a younger audience who I get the feeling that they think I am cool, which I decidedly am not, but I appreciate their delusion.
Do you feel like social media and people use cosplay and social media uh, just to say they're dressing up as something, just to like grasp a wider audience without actually having more of the spirit of cosplay? Is that anything you've seen?
Um, I haven't personally run into too many people that I think do that. I don't follow like a lot of really big cosplay accounts. Most of the people I follow are people I meet at conventions and people I just really like personally. So I personally haven't run into that, but if someone is cosplaying just to gain a bunch of followers, like I don't honestly really care. Like it doesn't affect me.
That's a pretty good stance to take on it. So when you're cosplaying, like you said, it you admittedly said like, yeah, to outside it is just kind of weird. Um,
Mhm.
like, is there any form of like embarrassment on your end of like feeling that outward judgment, or just
Oh,
kind of like,
totally. All the time. All the time. Just today I was doing like a little little itty bitty photo shoot in my driveway of the cosplay I'm wearing now for, posts that are going to go up next week. And, my driveway is like pretty far back from the road. Like I'm kind of obscured by trees, but I can still see cars slowing down as they drive past. Like, what is that person doing? And I like run into the garage and hide. Like, at conventions, it's very different because
Mm.
everyone there is, a guaranteed nerd and it is what it is. But I don't like openly just come out and say like, oh yeah, I have a cosplay YouTube to people I meet. Like that's
Right.
not something I really advertise.
So what for the people that you have brought up to, is that generally like, is there a general reaction to that? Like I'm assuming someone like your parents or anyone, like what's their immediate reaction, I guess?
People are usually actually quite impressed. And like they think it's pretty cool, which is a great reaction. So maybe I
Yeah,
should
honestly,
talk
like
about it
you're
more.
I don't know if said it yet, but your work is quite impressive. You managed to really take a great look at these characters and really do them justice.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I like I said earlier, I'm a very like anxious person. I'm a very introverted person. So I kind of keep my hobbies to myself. I like to say I'm a closet nerd. But once I kind of like get to know someone and like know they're like on the level, I will admit like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go take photos this weekend.
On the level, like you gotta feel out the person to know, like, all right, well, how weird are they first? Like, can they?
Exactly.
What's your opinion on? Because like a lot of cosplay, like you said, it started out in things like anime. What's your opinion on people who do more of the like lewd cosplays? Like, is that a thing that's like, how is that perceived by the community? Like, does it seem as just more of like, oh, you're just kind of attention getting, or is it something that's just like accepted on the other end of the spectrum, I guess?
It definitely varies from person to person with their opinion on it. I know people that think, kind of like sexy cosplays or more like skimpy cosplays are like the bane of the earth. And oh my gosh, they're like ruining cosplay for the rest of us. Why did they have like hundreds of thousands of followers when I make this amazing foam armor I spent so much time on and I get like 3 likes and they're getting 500 likes because they're showing their butt?
Right,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, there's definitely people like that. I think they are now kind of in the minority, though. That's kind of another issue in the community that I personally think has calmed down over the past several years, that it's not so much of an issue anymore. And if someone wants to, like, I'm thinking of like Lisa McManage, I think is a popular cosplayer that kind of does like, like sexy cosplay.
Mhm.
If she wants to like, show like her lower butt dressed as like Lola Bunny from Space Jam, like more power to her.
Just like go for it, your confidence. Like this is a hobby that anyone can make their own, and even though like, so why do you think other people tend to have a problem with it?
I oh my gosh, there's so many reasons I could get into. I will blame first our patriarchal society and general like sexism and just kind of like, these old school concepts that still kind of linger around the general consciousness. I would say the reason a lot of cosplayers don't like it is kind of like exactly like the scenario I gave, where someone who shows more skin will get a lot of likes from an audience who's looking for that content,
Mhm.
whereas someone who maybe is a really skilled craftsperson who spends a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of like dedication making something doesn't get as much attention. And that is probably where honestly most of the drama starts in the cosplay community, because everyone wants attention on social media. Everyone is posting because, at least in some small part of them somewhere, they want a certain number of likes.
Right.
And that's okay. It's okay to want appreciation for things you work hard on, but it's not okay to tear others down in comparison, in my opinion.
Do you think it's the like having these more sexy lewd cosplays are more of a symptom of the medium or more of the community which follows these?
I think it's both because I do think at least the cosplayers I have seen that make that kind of like sexy content, I do think they are genuine fans and, genuine cosplayers, and they are doing it because they enjoy it and they're making content from these things because they're fans. But, you don't make that kind of content at the level they do and at the production value they do unless there is an audience for it, an audience to
Right.
fund it. Yeah.
So, what would you just generally say is your favorite part about cosplay?
My favorite part is, oh, it sounds so cheesy, but it is the community.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like I've said, I am a anxious person. But cosplay has introduced me to so many amazing, wonderful people who are so talented and so skilled and so passionate about what they do. And my favorite part is we are all nerds playing dress up. And there's kind of an attitude that you have to have when you do that of kind of not taking yourself too seriously. At least hopefully. The people who take themselves too seriously are the people I don't interact with. So
What does it mean take too seriously? I don't. Yeah.
some people will get into cosplay and feel very full of themselves. And they seem to forget that they're going to go home and take off like the wig and the wig cap and look like an egg. So
Yeah, like at the core of it, like it is silly.
yeah,
And like,
I will fully admit it is a silly hobby, but it's a hobby I really enjoy and it's a hobby I learn a lot from and it's a hobby that I've gained a lot from.
for sure. Yeah, like I think that's something that's not recognized enough. Like just because it's less common doesn't make at its core what it is silly. Like at its core, most things are silly. Like something as accepted as sports. Like yeah, your entire hobby is putting a ball into a goal.
Exactly. If you look at any hobby or any activity that people do, I could say, people going to NFL games, buying $50 jerseys and painting their faces, those are some very silly people. Just as
Yeah.
silly as the kids running around your local park dressed as anime characters.
So what would you say be the worst part about cosplay?
That is a hard question because there's so much I love, but kind of going off of what we were speaking about before, I would say that the worst part is kind of the animosity that people can have towards each other. That, people feel very vulnerable and competitive sometimes in the social media game, especially
Mm-hmm.
because, I mean, not everyone gets attention. And most people on social media, at least some small part, they want, some attention, they want some credibility. And I know cosplayers who are much, much, much better than me, like so amazingly talented, so amazingly skilled, with like 100 followers. And maybe that's really frustrating. And maybe that can, brood some like bad vibes. And I think that is kind of the worst part
Hmm.
when people like face these issues of jealousy and animosity and feel like it has to be a competition.
So kind of a double-edged sword. Like the best and worst parts tends to be the community itself.
Exactly. I feel like that's true for most things. Like, there's great people and there's not so great people. It's just like anything else in the world.
Yeah, and like, there's kind of touched on this. There's a mentality that comes with being in cosplay, um, but like whenever you are going to like a convention, there probably even yourself has to be some level of like, yeah, I'm one of the cooler people in this room because like I mean just look at me, like, right?
I mean, I think it would be great if people could have that self-confidence. I don't know if I do, maybe a little bit, but
I mean if you're
I
in like line for something, I don't know, I maybe this is my inflated view of it in my own head, but like if I come in like looking sick with this crazy cosplay that I just put a bunch of time and effort into, I think it looks great, like I don't know. I feel like I would walk with my chin a little bit higher than the person that just comes in with their like convention tag. Like,
I mean, that's fair. I can say from my experience, when I do have like a really intricate cosplay that I've put a lot of effort into and I feel really good, for me, it doesn't translate into like pride as much as it translates into like fun and like the enjoyment of having that experience.
right. Think it like opens up a bit more doors for the experience during the cosplay. Like you get to have more interactions because you're in cosplay. Like no one's probably going up to just some random person that's there, but like because you're in costume, you're having more interactions, you're meeting more people, which is the whole reason to go to a convention. I feel like is
Exactly. And
all the
cosplay can
interactions.
make you feel pretty good. I know I walk a little bit higher when I'm in like Shira boots. So
Oh man. Uh, so what's a good story that you have from a convention? Like,
oh my gosh. Okay. The first one that came to mind was actually my very first convention. And this was when I was in the Honey Lemon outfit with like the yellow dress. And yeah, there were some weird people, but I remember it was my first convention and I was so overwhelmed with joy at the realization that everyone in this huge space was just as nerdy and weird as I was. And that was just such an amazing feeling to have at my age when I was like, an older teenager and, kind of like figuring myself out. And suddenly I was in this space with everyone who liked the same things as me. And that was wild. And there was one specific interaction where I was just, standing somewhere with a friend, and a guy came up to me who was dressed as another character from the same movie. And he reached into his bag and he handed me a little 3D printed black microbot, which is something from the film. They're like these teeny tiny little robots, like an inch and a half high, just kind of like little triangle things. And he had 3D printed it from the film to give to people at the convention.
oh, that's really
And
cool.
I still have it. It is one of my favorite things. And I think that interaction right there really emphasizes what I love most about cosplay and what is the best part about cosplay is that it enables people to have these really amazing interactions.
That's really cool, and I think we blew through the time actually. Uh, so that was really great. I know on a high note. Thanks a bunch for coming on. I love your stories. Love hearing about this whole community as a whole and everything that goes into it. Where can people find you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. People can find me on Instagram and YouTube, as well as Facebook. On all of those platforms, I am listed as Chelle Bell Cosplay, which is Chelle. Yeah, I think I spelled that right. God, that's my own name. Chelle. Yeah, Belle. Yep, that's correct. I know how to spell.
All right, Shell Bella cosplay. That'll be all over the description. Bunch of people go check you out. See the wonderful work that you do.
Great, thank you so much.
If you made it this far, thanks a bunch for tuning in. If you want to help out the show, be sure to follow our socials. They'll be in the description. I'm Trevor, and this was Out of Somewhere.